orbital transit is very different to radial transit, as it generally distributes the traffic more equally than to a focal point. In a radial system, most of the patronage is driven to populated hubs along a corridor. The greatest objective to orbital transportation is providing connectivity from one line to another. Today, I'm going to try to see whether these orbital railways are justified. Obviously, an orbital system is best between interconnected lines close together. No one would travel the whole loop. That is just not justified. Using some simple mathematics and this diagram, you can see the trips are only effective at around 114 degrees or less. Any more, cross-city trips are generally much better. Are orbital loops justified in every city? Well, not really. Cities that lack in any radial lines would find it tricky to justify a loop. Not only do they miss the benefit of interchangeable trips, you lose out on having a focal point which is needed to justify the orbital trips. Some cities knew this early on, that having an orbital bypass was essential to provide connectivity and reduce pressure on the radial system. Tokyo, for example, took advantage of this with the Yamanote line, which originated as a bypass. Eventually, taking advantage of the rebuild of the city, they brought that orbital to the city central district, completing the loop after 30 years. By having the loop connecting both the central district and the suburbs of Tokyo, meant this orbital line brought economic and social benefits, as it takes a bulk of the demand off the radial network and also connects to a focal point. Being built so early on, it's tricky to measure if it was justified because the costs are not very readily available. Another city that loves to build rail loops is Moscow. The 19.4 kilometers Koltsevaya line with its 12 stations. Being built during the 1950s, it inspired to get more loops to be built afterwards due to the success of this inner core one. Relatively built quickly in 9 years, it's one of the fastest ones built in Europe. When looking at more recent examples in Asia, Shanghai and Singapore rail loops are very similar. They both serve the metro area, and they are around 30 to 40 kilometers long, and around 30 stations involved, with costs around $4 to $6 billion. Both staged differently, which means that Singapore takes a bit longer to complete its loop. Is this something we can strive for in the Western world? I've noticed when discussing orbital systems currently constructed in the Western world is why it's costing so much compared to what we've built in the past, or relevant examples in Asia. The issues of cost management go way beyond the scope of this video, but generally things cost more due to the lack of building things with efficiency, or political incentive to get something done as quickly as possible. There are plenty of other factors, but generally building cheaper modes of transportation won't solve the underlying issues present in transport decision making, which is why costs are escalating. Paris Express and SRL are bold, yet both ideas are both justified in their own right. They just need some tweaking to skim off the fat. Both in their own right are serving an intensive radial network, serving many important destinations. Also, a major factor is reducing travel times to jobs outside the CBD, so that people living further away can use public transport to head to jobs in the middle cluster. And by no means, these projects are perfect. SRL West and parts of Paris Express could be just cut out entirely. Some of the stations could be simplified in the SRL project, and these cost savings could look into additional stations. SRL isn't as advanced as Paris Express, but there's still many details they can improve upon. Also, if you're concerned like me about the cost of upcoming transit projects, here's what you should do. Advocate to improve the government's agenda, and try to negotiate a way to improve transit sustainably. Orbital transit is exciting, but reducing the risks and having good management of construction will surely mean we get the best out of taxpayers' funds. I love transit in Melbourne, and I'm aware there's a fine line between what a government can achieve and pushing it too far can lead to poor outcomes. Orbital transit in the Western world are not insane, as they have some merit. Even Perth in Australia is looking at a future loop line. We just need to plan it out properly, and by the time that happens, we can have a useful transport network for everyone.
And don't forget to hit that bell notification so you can find out when the next video is. Twilight Sparkle out. See ya!